We're going to wait for a few people to get on here. We just turned it on, so looks like we'll have a good Bible study this night. If you're joining us, we've got about 2 or 3 minutes. Go get you a cup of coffee, glass of tea or something, a snack, whatever, and get your kids. We'll sit down. We're going to talk about somebody in the Bible today that's pretty interesting. So just wanted to let you know that we've got a couple of minutes before we start, so go get yourself ready. Jim Campbell, my buddy, how are you? It's good to see you tonight. Just telling everybody to go get them a cup of coffee. We got a couple of minutes before we get started, and we will be on our way. Hi, Brenda Green. I'm going to start here in just a minute, Brenda. Kind of waiting for a few people to get on. 4 came on, 2 dropped off. How about that? That was pretty quick. Here we go. Somebody coming on here. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? We're going to talk about somebody in the Bible tonight that maybe you've never studied. You've heard of her possibly. And one of the ladies, wonderful ladies in the Bible that is just a fantastic an example. How you doing, Danita? And my buddy, Reverend Jeff Elliott, I went to high school with. Danita, you remember Jeff, don't you? Anyway, so we're going to have this good Bible study tonight. We're going to talk about our dear friend Deborah in the Bible. Most of us know about her, but we're going to talk about some of the things that we might not know specifically about her. I find it very fascinating that most people don't always know the full story behind the people that are in the Bible and what they contributed to our faith. And so we're going to look at her tonight. We find out there are probably 7 things about her that are really fascinating, who she was and what kind of titles, if you will, she held. Hi, Lucy Townsend. So the first thing is we're going to find out about her. Of course, we all know she was this fearless warrior. She just did not have any fear at all. Her name specifically, Deborah, means bee, like a bumblebee. She is one of those people that she was kind to everybody. And like the Bible would say, she gave honey to her friends, but she had a fatal sting to her enemies. And so she's also, the bee is supposed to be a very intelligent animal, scientifically one of the most intelligent animals out there. And so she was a very smart lady, a warrior lady with intelligence and with the ability to be kind and then punish those that needed the punishment. So she was a fearless warrior. We also find out that Deborah was a wife. She was married. It doesn't say a whole lot about her husband. His name was Lapidoth, Lapidoth. Very unusual name. I can only imagine that in this day and time when women were supposed to be kind of in the background, but here she was, a great leader, a great warrior. Her husband would probably, I'm going to have to say, I hope he was a very supportive husband and understood who she was and did his best to be the kind of man behind her, his woman, so to speak, at the time. So it's kind of a worldly thing and a spiritual thing holding the opposite ends. The world saying she is of the least, and the Lord saying I put her in a position of prominence. So being a wife, that was fascinating as well. Hey, Jamie, Lucy's going to be Deborah in this situation, and you're going to be Lapidoth. If you don't understand that comment, ask Lucy about it after the Bible study. Also, we find out that aside from being a fearless warrior and a wife, she was a prophetess. She was able to have the ability to discern, if you will, the mind and the purpose of God, and then to declare what she had discerned God had told her to say to the people. Not just to declare it, but to declare it in a way that they would understand. That can be just as valuable as making a declaration. So John and Debbie Gripe are joining us. So now we're going to find out a little bit about that, what her purpose was in that aspect and discerning. And then after that, hello there, Kathy. After that, we found out she's Deborah in the Bible is a fearless warrior. She's also a wife. She's also a prophetess. If you want to read about her later, maybe, I would encourage you. You will find her in the book of Judges, chapter 4 and 5. She's done some really good poetry there. So now we know she's a poet. That is some wonderful work. Her poetry rivals that even more so than some of the great women that had wrote poetry in the Bible. The Mother Mary, all of them. She has some fantastic poetry as a warrior, wife, a prophetess, now a poet. Deborah in the Bible is just fantastic in that way. We're going to also look at her as she was an agitator. You know, what is an agitator? It's a person that stirs up, if you will, or gets people to be excited about a public discussion that she may be having from her point of view. So she could sit down and get people riled up, get them excited, and cast a vision in such a way. And that was very important later in her ministry, if you will, in her calling in life, to be able to get people to join her in whatever it was that she needed to do. We know that as a ruler, she was a ruler over all of Israel. All of Israel was under her. She was able to do some pretty neat things that way. As an agitator, though, she would stir up Israel's concern about their land, about their low spiritual condition that they had. They kind of really gotten away from God, and this is the reason that he called Deborah, to get them to come back to him. And so she used her ability as an agitator to stir people up and understand that they had a low spiritual condition. Their land was all torn up, because if you've studied the Bible much, you'll find that when the people would fall away from God, their land would not be good. It would have briars and thorns and thistles and not produce a good crop. When they were close to God, the soil was rich to where they would have a great abundance and a big growth of whatever they were growing, you know, their food and their grapes and all kinds of things. So when they were in God's will, the land produced well. When they were out of God's will, the land was just a terrible, terrible land. And so under the rule of the Canaanites, they had lost their liberty. And so the Canaanites had been oppressive for 40 years over them. And Deborah was in there trying to rile people up with her agitator ability to see her point of view. And she did more than just prophesy about all of that. She got her nation to quit being lazy, to not be in despair anymore, if you will. She really got her people to become fearless. She got her people to be ready for a war even, and to go and have a devotion to be back in God's graces again and be God's people again. And they finally woke up to that, and they remembered that for 40 years had all this bondage they had been in, and the captivity, the slavery they were under. They just didn't want to do that anymore. And so they took the challenge that she had given them, that God was going to help them. And Deborah is really strong about saying that the Lord was going to lead them, if you will, against their enemy. And so now that they began to believe this, and they became more confident, day after day, they would just sit down and get excited and get her words, gather them in, if you will, and the divine truths and wisdom that she had. There was certainly an understanding that deliverance for the whole nation and the people was at hand. So they were going to kind of get away from the foolishness, if you will, and go out and fight. They was tired of just sitting back and letting them be controlled. So now they're going to go out and fight. So her being a ruler over this whole great country of Israel, everybody kind of had to listen to her. She would go and sit out under a tree, and it was called I'll remember it in just a minute, but we do know that Deborah was the fifth ruler, if you will, of the leaders, judges of Israel. She was raised by God to deliver his people from bondage, from the idolatry that they had, and God had used her in such a way to fulfill a time to bring the people back to seeing who they were, to seeing that they were the people of God, and that when they followed him, good things happened. But we as people today, even we get away from who we are. We have this opportunity to be a people of in a country of America, to do great and mighty things because we follow God. And I want to tell you, we get further away from him. We took him out of the school system back in the early 60s. We've just don't even want to say the Lord's Prayer in public anymore, or put our one nation under God, trying to get that taken out as a people. As we push God out of our country, we're going to find ourselves in the same place that Israel finds itself. Our land is not going to be productive. Our spiritual condition is going to be falling. And so I want to encourage you to take the people around you. Church, man, they don't have to be people in the church. Specifically, people at work or play or wherever you are. Be godly in front of them. We're all sinful people, but we follow God. We ask for forgiveness, and we need to gather people around to talk about the things of God and to grow in our faith. And if we do that, God is going to bless us again. We're still being blessed by God. He's not removed his hand entirely from our country. But, oh my goodness, the more I kind of keep up with what's going on and what it looks like around the world and in our own country, the more I believe that there's an opportunity here for us to lose our blessing. So let's not do that. Let's stay right there in the presence of the Lord and study and talk about the things of God with other people. And I think we'll be much like Deborah in this situation, where she's calling her nation back. They're excited, and they're going to do what they have to do to get back close to God again. So I think we find out that she was sitting under, it seems like it was a palm tree, and they called it either the palms of Deborah or something like that. So she would go out and sit there every day, and she would dispense justice. People would come to her with their gripes and their complaints, their issues with maybe boundaries or whatever it was, and she would listen to both sides, and she would dispense justice. She would talk about the country and what they needed to do, and her wisdom and her understanding and knowledge was so valuable that she always was like holding court. Everywhere she went, they wanted to hear her voice. So not only was she that great ruler, and we talked about being a fearless warrior, but as a warrior, she fought not just with words. She went about throwing off, I guess you call it the oppressor's yoke, I don't know, of the day. When she did that with swords, she would go out and go to war. She was what a fighter was, we'd call a patriot, if you will. She was very patriotic. And she tried to be the kind of inspired heroine of the Bible, if you will, and she proved out to be that. There was a guy that was head of the army. His name was Barak, B-R-A-K, and he was in charge of the military. And she went out and told him, hey, well, I want you to, God's told me to tell you to go and do battle against the Philistines. And then it sounds easy today, because we know the end of the story. We've read this story. We've heard about it a lot. And so it doesn't seem like such a big deal. But if you studied and find out what's happening here, the Israelites had about 10,000 men to go fight. And here they were supposed to fight against a guy named Sisera, S-I-S-E-R-A, I think is how you spell Sisera. He had 100,000 fighters. So it's 10 to 1. And the more people, the greater the odds. I mean, it's just the less odds that you're going to win. But he didn't want to do it. Man, he was like, I can't do that. I mean, it's 10,000 to 100,000. And so Deborah told him, said, God has told me that you are to go into battle. And he says, okay, I'll do it, but I won't go unless you go with me. So here she is, the supreme ruler over the Israelites, and being asked to go to war, and she agrees. But she says, you're not going to get the credit for this victory. We're going to do battle and we're going to win, but you won't get credit because you didn't do what God told you to do. Someone else, a woman, will get credit, and it wasn't her, it wasn't Deborah that got credit for it. It was another woman. And so they go into battle and they're fighting, and here's how God works. He didn't have 10,000 men against 100,000 men all by themselves. They had a valley that the Palestinians were in, and there was a creek in that area, and so God made a torrential rainstorm come down, and it had hail like nobody's business, and it was such a hard rain that the Palestinians couldn't even see in front of them hardly, and so I'm sure what happened out of that is God either wiped them out and drowned them, or did partial of that and let the 10,000 warriors battle and win the war, because they did have an engagement of war there. And so one of the fascinating things about that is out of these 100,000 fighters that Sisera had, he also had 900 iron chariots pulled by horses as well. And that is like a major military supremacy there. You just can't fight against that and win without God. And so they went into battle, they won, and they were in the midst of that winning, the Israelites pressed the Palestinians back. They were on the run, and Sisera was he went into this tent to hide, and there was a woman in that tent. And while she was in there cooking or whatever she was doing, he said, "Hurry, hide me, because we're being overrun, and I need you to hide me so I won't be captured." She goes, "Oh, okay. So lay down under these covers here, and hide. When they come in, I'll tell them that I don't know where you are." And so he laid down there, and he fell asleep. Now, can you imagine? In the middle of a battle, the middle of a war, and you're about to get run over, he lays down and he fell asleep. So what did he do in the midst of that dream? It didn't last long, didn't end good for him. That woman, she took a tent spike. And you know how you spike a tent to make it stand up and hold the cords outside? Evidently, she had a few extra ones inside. She took a tent spike and a big old hammer. I guess she'd gone down to Bill's Wholesale on Craft Street and bought one. I don't know. Stuck it in his temple and drove that thing through his skull and killed him. And she got credit for the victory, because she killed the number one ruler of the Palestinians. And so this is Deborah commanding people's attention, being a woman who is a great ruler, full of wisdom. She rubs people wrong a little bit, not too bad, but agitates them to where they get stirred up, or maybe they get excited about whatever she's talking about, and they want to go out and rush out and to do what she's encouraged them to do. And in this situation, it was to go into battle, because they've been 40 years oppressed, and how in the world do you do that and get people of a 40-year oppression to say, "Hey, enough's enough, let's go fight this war"? And they did. They were all encouraged, 10,000 to 100,000. She was a person that spoke for God to the people. She was, they call it a prophetess. She also had to take care of her home life. I mean, that's one of those things that, I don't know, maybe she was wealthy enough in being the leader of the country that she had people to help her at home to run that dishwasher and the clothes and wash the clothes and all those things, cook those meals, because she still had her wifely duties. Doesn't say anywhere in the scriptures that she has children. I can't find it anywhere anyway. She may not have, but she was a mother to this country. So she had that nurture in her to nurture the people. And being so fearless of a warrior, it made her a fearless ruler as well, because she heard from God. She trusted. This is the whole key behind this woman, Deborah, in the Bible. The crux of it is she trusted God. Man, if you're a ruler and it's 10,000 to 100,000, only way you can get through that is to trust God. You never would go into battle like that, 10 to 1 odds, and say, "Hey, we can do this." Just strategically, it just doesn't work. So let me ask you a question. You hear my squeaky chair? Somebody needs to put some WD-40 on it, maybe. Here's the question: do we trust God? We're in the midst of this pandemic or whatever it is. We're concerned. We're not sure what the future's going to hold. But do we trust God? It's easy to say yes. But when the reality comes down to it, do you trust God enough in the hard things that look like there's no way out? Do you trust Him enough to find you a way? How do we get back together as a body of Christ? You just don't open the doors and say to return to what we were, because you can't return to that anymore. That could be a portion of it, but there's got to be more to it. We have got to communicate Jesus to people. We must be a people that our number one priority is to tell people about Christ. Not let somebody else tell him. Not let somebody else share the news. Each of us have got to do that. And one of the things that I ask myself, this church has been here for 120 years, Sango United Methodist Church. Could you answer the question, did this church make a difference in our community? Has it? And we all say, oh, yes, it has. Okay, I'm good with that. I grew up here. I kind of feel like the same. But here's my question to you. How has it made a difference? What can you put your finger on? This is because of this. Our church has been here for 120 years. This community is better because of A, B, and C. Now, if you don't have an answer to that, think about it. Pray about it. And get out there and make a change. Be an influencer. Because Deborah in the Bible, the one we studied about tonight, she was a major influencer, not just in Israel, but even today, thousands of years later. She has a major influence on us when we read about her, when we study about her. Not just read her story, but dive down into who she is. And so I'm going to ask you today to make a difference. Be an influencer. Now, not later, not when we come back. Be an influencer in your community and around the people you're associated with. Who works with you? Who gardens in the garden club with you? Or who does whatever you do. Be an influencer by talking about the things of God and the message of Jesus Christ, why he was important to come to this world. That's what people need to hear about. God bless you. I love you. What a joyful time. I'm so glad I saw some of my friends on here. Jesse Sorrow jumped in, and Russ Baker. I see Stacy Hollis. Just so many more of you. And I'm excited that we had a good turnout tonight. And send me a few messages. Let me know if how the study helped you or if you learned anything at all. Anything you'd like to do a Bible study on next week, let me know. Anybody you want to learn about, any place you want to study about. And I'll do my research as best I can and try to share with you something that maybe you didn't know before. God bless you. I love you. Go in peace.